The National Student Financial Aid Scheme, NSFAS, has confirmed that a total of 5,000 students who were funded for the 2020 academic year have been recently unfunded. A recent financial information obtained from the South African Revenue Services, SARS, has revealed that these students declared total household family income was above 350,000 threshold. We talk about this now with NSFAS Administrator, Dr. Randall Carolissen, who joins me now live via Skype. Good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on the SABC News channel.
Thank you.
All right, so
good to have you.
Thank you so much indeed. So does this mean that these students had actually lied about their financial status?
So what it means is that the data that they provided us proved to be incorrect when we checked with SARS. I would not go so far as to say that they lied, because we're giving them the opportunity to explain why they have a difference. And then if the explanation is not satisfactory, we will recover the money. It's in some cases it might be totally justified. People might have lost their jobs, and the data that we got from to validate against might be slightly out of kilter. But there are such severe cases of wealthy people that got funded by NSFAS that we had to unfund it, and we had to tell them that they must provide us with evidence that we should reinstate their funding.
And I think the question really is, how did and why did that happen? Didn't NSFAS verify this before they could fund these students?
So when I started at NSFAS 2 years ago as administrator, the system that NSFAS used was to validate data against credit bureau data. Now, credit bureau data is also self-declarations. So in other words, you tell the credit bureau who earns what in your family, and on that basis, they then form a profile of you. So that process was totally unreliable, and in fact, it was open to abuse. And therefore, the only reliable way to determine household income is through income tax data, because then you can also pick up income beyond just salary. You can also pick up investment income or rental income. And we have found cases where very wealthy people qualified for NSFAS based on low salaries, but they had actually quite high, large investment income. And the amount of complaints that we receive from fellow students through our hotlines confirmed that, and therefore we had to act.
All right. So 5,000 is a large number, Dr. Carolissen, and this will surely impact on these students. We understand, however, that they can challenge their funding status.
Absolutely. We gave them 2 weeks to respond, and we have opened up dedicated channels to deal with that fairly quickly. So my main concern is that we need to get those ones that are legitimate back into the system so that they can continue the year unhindered, and then deal later on with those that we need to recover money from. And so the process is well underway, and we have already received petitions from many students. This 5,000 students must be viewed against the 720,000 students that we fund this year. So it is a large number, but in the bigger scheme of things, it is, it is not that big, but yet it is annoying. I understand that, yeah.
But are you able to talk to us about the process? Once they start lodging perhaps an appeal, these 5,000, what then happens?
So the minute we receive their documentation, we have satisfied ourselves that it's valid, we reinstate their funding immediately. So there is no delay, no wait, they don't have to reapply. From next year onwards, we will do the validation at the beginning of the year. The reason why we did it so late in the year is because this MOU with SARS was concluded late in the year. Now, some people do say that we are insensitive, and I know it's a difficult thing to do, but we are working with taxpayers' money, and as the accounting authority, I do not have the discretion to decide when and how to act. I have to act when these things are brought to my attention.
And from what you're telling us, so one would believe that there may be more of such students in your NSFAS system, because the reality is getting an affidavit from the police station as a supporting document, perhaps that your parents are not employed or they're earning less, is something very simple. So you may have such students in your system, more of them, isn't it?
Absolutely, and we intend to go back a few years to check income statements of such people, because the amount of reports that we get about wealthy students flaunting their wealth and flaunting the fact that they can abuse the NSFAS system. It's just too many to ignore. And we will be acting because it's totally unfair. This money could have gone to poor students that are more in need of that. So we will clamp down on this and put in place the structures to prevent this from happening going forward.
All right. So what will happen to some of these students who may have benefited unduly, and especially in instances where NSFAS has already paid a portion of the money to the institutions? Will they repay the money?
We will find legal ways to insist that the fiscus recover its money. Part of my job is if the money was spent in an irregular fashion, is that we need to recover it. And we are in discussion with our legal teams as to exactly the route that we will be following.
All right. So the 2021 application cycle is open. How are things looking now?
I'm very pleased to say that since we opened on the 3rd of August, and we only open up on electronic portals because of the restrictions on travel, we have received close to 90,000 applicants already on our portals. We expect that figure to increase quite dramatically soon, because I can tell you now that post-COVID there's going to be a lot of demand for NSFAS funding. And therefore we urge students to apply early and not wait till next year, because there might not be an opportunity to walk in next year for NSFAS funding like we had in prior years. The walk-ins is a big bureaucratic problem and hassle for us. So if people can make use of this application window, it will help everybody. And another important point is students must realize that applying for NSFAS is only one step. You only become funded once we receive registration data from an institution. So it's important to get good marks and also make sure that you apply to your university or your TVET college.
All right. So I think it's always important, Dr. Carolissen, to sort of recap the process. What is required, the prerequisites, and who is eligible for NSFAS funding?
So the eligibility, if you are a SASA recipient or you live in a SASA household, we don't need proof of income. You qualify on that basis, and we do the validations ourselves with the Department of Social Development. And that is actually working quite well since we started that process. We have funded over 200,000 students this year just from that partnership. The other qualification is, of course, the economic qualification. It's 350,000 household income, and there we will require proof of income. In all cases, we require certified copies of ID documents and certified copies of pay slips where applicable. We do validate everything through the Department of Home Affairs, and so we will also ask students to make sure that they provide us with correct details, because often the delay happens when we find a difference between the ID number and the student when we validate at Home Affairs, and that causes unnecessary delays. And then you upload those documents, we then begin to assess it, and we declare you then eligible for NSFAS funding. In other words, you are not funded yet, you qualify. And then as soon as we receive your registration data, you then become a funded NSFAS student. Now, one of the challenges that we have is that we receive registration data after registrations, and sometimes that goes into March and April in some institutions. In that case, we do fund upfront. We make upfront payments to assist students during the months of February and March, and in some cases also January.
All right, so the application cycle open till the 30th of November. Dr. Carolissen, we thank you so much for your time here on the SABC News Channel.
Thanks a lot.